Hey, what's going on everyone? Sam here with Lake Pro Tackle. In today's video, we're going to be answering the big question, does size matter? And no, we're not talking about that, guys. We're talking about line diameter size. So in this video today, we're going to be taking a bunch of different 12-pound lines, and I'm going to be talking about why you need to be a little more conscious when you're choosing your line, whether it be for a specific technique, whether it be on the water and you're just not getting a lot of bites. We've got some reasons and some really good supporting facts to tell you why you might want to size down your line and why it matters to have the right line for your technique. So for the purposes of this video, we chose a bunch of 12-pound lines from a bunch of the big brands. We've got Seaguar, Sunline, Daiwa, Samurai, J Fluoro, and Berkley Trilene 100% fluorocarbon. You know, what's interesting, and growing up and not having a specific brand that I was really loyal to, I always thought that you could really just get away with choosing one line over the other for certain techniques. You know, when I was younger and naive, I would throw my crankbaits on like 17-pound line. And now that, you know, I graduated college, fished the college circuits, and I just fish all the time. Now the highest line that I'm throwing on my crankbaits is like 12-pound line. So we're going to talk about different techniques and how you need to be matching your line size with the technique you're throwing. So starting off, we're going to talk about some just straight up facts here. We're going to go in order. Like I said, all these are going to be the top of the line lines we have in each brand. So for Seaguar, that's going to be the Seaguar Tatsu. Just listing off a couple facts here. Seaguar Tatsu line diameter on this 12-pound line is going to be 0.285 millimeters, right? So keep that in mind. Next up is going to be the Sunline Shooter. This line diameter is going to be the exact same as that Seaguar Tatsu, 0.285. Now we're going to go down to these other two brands here, and these two, I will say, are less expensive than the Tatsu and the Shooter. However, you know, the line diameter on this Daiwa Samurai J Fluoro, this line diameter is going to be 0.299, and the Berkley Trilene coming in last in line diameter is going to be 0.33 millimeters. So there's a huge jump between Seaguar Tatsu, Sunline Shooter, and the Berkley Trilene 100% fluorocarbon. Now, why is that? So there's a couple reasons. When you get into this higher end line, let's take the Sunline and the Seaguar, they're both going to be made in a specific way where that line is going to be, they're trying to make it as thin as possible. You know, they have a lot of other line, lines of line, basically, you know, with Seaguar's AbrazeX and VizX Red Label and the new BaseX that we sell in store. And, you know, you've got Sunline's Sniper, FC Sniper, which is a really great line also. The line diameter doesn't sway that much between Shooter and Sniper. So what's the big deal? What are the companies trying to get at here? You know, when I'm picking out a line for a certain technique, the biggest thing I keep in mind is what is my hook diameter? What is the gauge of the hook I'm throwing? So, you know, I've got a drop shot hook here, a shaky head, a flipping hook, and some treble hooks. You know, if I'm throwing a drop shot hook, I'm going to have the thinnest line possible just to get the most action out of that bait. You know, having a 17-pound line on a drop shot, generally one isn't the best idea for the fish seeing it, and we're going to talk more about that and how fish see in the water. But, you know, having a big thicker line is going to take a whole lot away from your bait's action on a drop shot. You know, I'm going to have a very similar line diameter when I'm throwing treble hooks, something like these Owner Stinger trebles. These are amazing for crankbaits, especially in a little more finesse situations. It's a little bit thinner wire than something like your typical Gamakatsus or even some other Owners. You know, moving up, we've got these shaky heads. You know, I will still throw 12 to 10-pound line on these shaky heads here, even though they're a 3/16 ounce weight. When you're matching your line size, it doesn't have to be 12, just any line size, whether it be 17, 10, 15, 14, doesn't matter. You want to make sure you match up the weight of that lure, the depth of that lure, and the gauge of your hook. You know, when I'm throwing flipping hooks, generally it's going to be 17 and above fluorocarbon, and we're not going to go into the braid side of it. You know, take what you learn here about line diameter and how it affects your fishing, and then apply it to the braid. So I just made the first key point a little bit ago. You know, throwing a drop shot on thicker line is not going to get you a whole lot more bites. Now, I do want to mention water clarity has a lot to do with what line you can get away with throwing. So if I'm fishing really clear water up north for smallmouth, I'm going to try to go as thin a line as possible as I can. You know, growing up here in Texas, a lot of people that I met in college and high school didn't throw anything lower than 17-pound line, which surprised me a lot. And, you know, quickly going through college, all my buddies are like, man, I'm not getting a lot of bites on my 17-pound line. I'm like, man, I don't throw anything bigger than 12. Start throwing, we can meet in the middle. Maybe move down to a 15 or a 14, depending on what brand you're looking at and what brand you like. Start looking at thinner diameter lines. Generally, when you're fishing dirtier water, let's say you're fishing a muddy river system or a muddy lake or something like that, it just rained, go ahead and throw your thicker line. You know, the fish aren't going to see its presence, and you know, this is actually a good transition kind of into how fish see in the water. You know, fish can see a whole lot of things in the water. You know, fish can see and feel around, scientifically, around 30 foot around them. They've got the lateral lines on the side of them, on their bodies, and they can really feel what's in the water. They can feel presence, they feel pressure, and they can hear as well. Bass have a really good sense of smell, sight, and feeling from their lateral line. So when you're talking about line diameter and line size, the way I think of it is as thin as I can go, that's what I'm going to go with. A lot of the videos out there that say this line is better because it excels at what it's rated for. A lot of the videos out there, you're going to find something like this Berkley Trilene can hold way more than 12 pounds of just straight tensile strength. This 12-pound line here, it might be able to even hold up to 15 pounds. And you're going to see that pretty consistently across a lot of videos on the internet. You take something like a Seaguar Tatsu, it's going to be pretty dang close to that 12-pound line and that 12-pound tensile strength to where it would break. So going into kind of how these lines stack up against each other, comparing their line diameters, something like the Seaguar Tatsu here, something like this Sunline Shooter, these both have a very exact tensile strength. You know, you're paying for this line diameter. Once you get up into this higher end line, you're paying for it to be thinner, you're paying for it to be much more abrasion resistant, right? And that comes at a price. Now, you take something like, again, that 12-pound Tatsu, guys, it's going to break at 12 pounds. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. There's tests on the internet everywhere that say this line is not as good because it breaks at 12 pounds or slightly under 12 pounds. And this line, maybe this Berkley 100% fluorocarbon, is better because it breaks at 15 pounds instead of 12 pounds, which is, you know, what it's rated for. Why is it a better line if you could just buy the 15 and get 17 out of it? Like, that's why they have different line sizes. Just because they label it something and it doesn't break at that exact weight, does it make it any worse? I don't believe so, because you're paying for the structure of the line. Seaguar has this double structure system in their Tatsu, which it's got a soft exterior, which makes it abrasion resistant, and a hard interior, and that's really what you're paying for there, as well as it's a single piece of line that they extrude out. When you move down into something like even Seaguar Invisex, Seaguar Abrazex, Berkley Trilene, a lot of those are a bunch of lines melded together and basically like welded together in certain sections. So you're paying for one full line when you pay for, you know, the top of the end lines. It's a singular line. There's no sewing together, stitching all that together to make separate lines. Now we're going to talk about, again, how fish see, hear, feel in the water. So generally, if I'm throwing a bigger style bait, let's say I'm flipping in Florida and I have a 1 ounce weight on, here's how I think of that. That's a big presence as it hits the water, one, and as it moves down the water column, that 1 ounce weight is pushing a lot of water out. Generally, you know, let's say I am flipping that big weight, I'm going to probably throw something like a 20-pound line. That's pretty thick compared to, I mean, a 10-pound line. You know, it's like double as thick, basically. So that presence of that weight and that bait is going to be massive. So I can move up in line size even if that water is clear, because that fish, what it feels firsthand is going to be that bait and that weight. You know, let's reverse the roles, and I'm throwing a drop shot. The drop shot has a very little presence on it. You know, if I'm throwing like a 3 or 4 inch worm, or like a little robo worm, a live shad, you know, that line, your main leader line is going to have a huge presence compared to a little drop shot hook and a little weight, as well as your little bait. So that's something to think about when you're throwing different techniques, whether it be drop shot to flipping to shaky heads to crankbaits. You've got to think about that presence that that line puts off compared to the bait. You know, is the line going to be too distracting for that fish? Does it put off any noise? And yes, line does make noise in the water as it flows through, as well as drag. Drag is a huge thing when it comes to different line diameters. So you take 20-pound line, let's take 10-pound line, right? Let's put a crankbait on each. That 10-pound line, with that crankbait, it's going to run a whole lot deeper than the 20-pound. And that's because the line diameter, as the line diameter cuts through the water, it's putting off a whole lot more drag. So that bait can't get as deep as it wants to, as opposed to, let's say, that 10-pound line. So again, presence in the water is a big thing. Now, if I'm throwing something like an A-rig, it's a massive presence, guys. I'm generally throwing 17 to 20-pound line on there. Some people, you know, will throw braid. That's up to them, whether they match up the rod, the reel, however they want to match it up. Generally, that thinner line diameter is going to get you a whole lot more bites. And, you know, matching up line diameter to the certain techniques you're doing, again, this is a very flimsy rod here. This is a medium light rod. It flexes very easily. Are you going to hit that, let's say we're throwing 12-pound line, are you going to hit that 12-pound, tensile strength? Probably not, because this rod can take a lot of that force, disperse it out, and, you know, you've got to have your drag set correctly as well. And this is huge, especially in the northern swing for smallmouth tournaments, for the Elite Series, Bass Pro Tour, whoever it may be, wherever they might be fishing. You take something like this Daiwa Kage. This is a shaky head rod. It's a 7'2", medium heavy, fast action. I'm going to probably be throwing something a little bit heavier, maybe 12 to 15-pound line on here as well. I'm going to have my drag lock down a little bit more, but this rod, it still disperses the weight, right? But it's got a heavier backbone, so you impart more force, 1, on the hook set, and 2, while you're fighting the fish. So I hope this video was very informational for you. I hope you enjoyed it. Guys, if you have a favorite line company, drop it down in the comments below. We want to know what that is. But thank you for watching, guys. If you have any questions, again, don't hesitate to reach out to us. Everything you saw here can be found at lakeprotackle.com, guys. If you're in the North Texas area, up near Gainesville, head over to the store. We'd be super happy to have you in here. You know, we love talking fishing. Tim and I both love fishing. We'll just talk with you all day if time allows. But thank you, guys. We will see you next time at Lake Pro Tackle.